You want my husky baby's human? The alien husky woman couldn't believe his words. He steadies his breathing, each exhale blooming white in the freezing air. Fresh snow clings to the battered plating across his shoulders, and his left glove is torn from the jagged remnants of a recent skirmish. Less than 20 yards away, crouched near a drift of untouched powder, she watches him with unblinking eyes. Her posture is predatory, like a coiled spring. The silence is electric, charged by the swirl of snow and the undeniable hostility flowing between them. You're pointing that weapon at the wrong female, she growls, voice pitched low in a warning that's equal parts threat and invitation. He doesn't move, not yet. For a heartbeat, the world feels compressed, as if every flake of snow holds its breath, waiting for the next spark. His instincts, honed by too many campaigns against far too many species, tell him this one isn't just another bounty. She's lethal. His knuckles tighten around his rifle, and there's a moment where he wonders if he should have just left her track in the snow undiscovered. But it's too late to consider safer paths. He's committed. A slow, humorless smirk tilts his lips, a reflex he can't quite quell, even when his muscles scream at him to be ready for her to pounce. Cade's voice, when he answers, is calm but cold. Maybe I am. But you'll have to convince me. The wind kicks up, scattering ice crystals between them in a brief swirling halo. She shifts on all fours, the white fur on her forearms blending with the snow. Black hair cascades down her back, the tips frosted with snowflakes that catch the pale moonlight. Twin ears, covered in dark fur that stands stark against her snow-kissed skin, swivel in his direction. She exhales, nostrils flaring, and he suspects she's picking up the scent of his sweat, or maybe the tang of adrenaline bleeding through his system. Then she rises to 2 feet, fluid and powerful, an undeniable presence that practically dwarfs the quiet realm around them. You have 5 seconds to lower that rifle. Her tone remains steady, each syllable clipped, carrying authority. There's something mesmerizing in the way her lips curl around the words, as if she's used to being obeyed without question. He does nothing of the sort, merely shifting his stance for better leverage. He's big, broad-shouldered, and battered by war, but her intensity makes him feel an odd twinge in his gut. She is, in every sense, a predator, lithe muscle beneath exotic fur, eyes that reflect the faint glow of starlight. The bounty on her head is hefty, enough to supply him for a year, but the moment he laid eyes on her, he knew collecting wouldn't be straightforward. Lower it and let you come close, he challenges. I've seen what you do to men who trust you. Her pupils narrow, and the corner of her lip curls in something that might be contempt, or a grin. She flexes her fingertips, revealing short, sharp claws that glint. Then you already know what I'm capable of. She lunges. Snow billows as her legs coil and release, and he's forced into instant defense. He fires a stun round, but she's faster than he anticipates. She slides sideways, leaving a white arc of powder in her wake. Her hand lashes out, and the metal plating on his forearm guards sparks where her claws scratch. The speed of her movement is terrifying. He expected quick, but not this. He pivots, shifts his weight, and tries to wrestle her down with a harsh grip on her shoulder. She twists free in a move that leaves him momentarily stunned by the raw agility that flows through her limbs like liquid steel. The next exchange is brutal. He lashes out with a swift elbow, she ducks, rakes her clawed fingers across his hip plating, drawing sparks instead of blood. He steps back, angling for the stun rifle, but she's too close. With a feral snarl, she grabs the barrel, forcing it away from her. He meets her gaze, spots the fierce gleam in her inhuman eyes, and for a fraction of a second, everything else blurs. Heat flares between them, anger, hatred, or something primal he can't name. She's strong, and the knowledge that he's in real danger stokes a thrill in him he hasn't felt in years. She bears down, forcing his rifle to the side. He lowers his head, meeting her forehead with a short, savage strike, enough to make her reel. She staggers but doesn't fall, lips parted in a growl. Her stare pins him, assessing whether he's going for lethal or just incapacitation. The hush of the wind around them intensifies the moment. They're so close now he can see each twitch of her pupils. He expects her to back off or launch another attack, but instead she releases the rifle barrel and vaults backward, landing nimbly. Her chest rises and falls, the faint white fur on her torso rippling with every breath. He raises the rifle, meaning to steady it on her once more, but in an instant, she's gone, vanished behind a swirl of falling snow. An unsettling quiet slips in. For a moment, he thinks she's run, but an instinct tells him she's still close. Muscles tense, he scans the dim surroundings. To his left, thick pines droop under the weight of ice. To his right, the slope of the mountain descends into a ravine. The cabin behind him stands silent, warm lights glowing through frosted windows. That's his safe house, the place he'd planned to regroup. Now, it's the site of a confrontation that's turned far more complicated than expected. Before he can fully reorient, she's behind him, her breath hot against his ear. "You don't want to take me alive," she murmurs, voice tinged with a purr that sends a violent jolt through his system. He whirls, but she's already shifting away, that eerie speed making her half a blur. A cold, bristling excitement grips his spine. He's rarely faced an opponent like this, one who moves like a phantom and uses the environment to her advantage. She leaps up onto a low branch and glares down, her silhouette framed by the moon. Her chest heaves, and he notices how the black fur on her ears stands on end. "Maybe I do," he says, a defiant grin tugging at his lips despite himself. "You've got a pretty high price on your head." She scoffs, baring her teeth, which look just sharp enough to suggest a cross between a human's and a predator's. "That's not all they want from me, and you know it." He can't deny it. His intel gleaned from the contract hinted at more than a simple kill or capture scenario. Something about her genetics being prized, about her being from a specialized breeding line. "I'm not in the habit of asking questions," he replies. "I take the job, I get paid. That's how this works." For a second, it appears she might leap at him again, but her upper lip curls, and she seems to reevaluate. Between them, the snowy clearing exudes a silent tension that's nearly alive. The cold air nips at every exposed patch of skin, but he feels heat radiating from his body, and it's not just from the exertion. There's a strange charge in the air, as if the friction between them has ignited something both of them are too stubborn to name. "And if your client wants more than my head? If they want what's inside me?" she asks bitterly. His mind ticks through the implications of that question. The bounty mention was explicit about wanting her broad and alive, something about lineage, but he never pried deeper. He almost retorts with a snarky line, but her eyes flash with genuine anger, and it kills the quip on his tongue. Instead, he exhales, letting the steam rise from his lips. "I don't ask why. But maybe this time I should." She jumps down from the branch, landing in a crouch that dissipates a puff of powdery snow. Despite the bruising on her forearm from their tussle, she's still tense, poised to strike again if she senses betrayal. "Then do it. Ask why." He doesn't. He can't. Because everything about this scenario is spiraling away from his usual pattern: capture, collect, move on. Maybe it's the fierce defiance in her gaze, or the savage grace that took him by surprise. But now he's unsettled by his own hesitation. Without lowering the rifle, he steps back, gesturing with a slight jerk of his head. "Inside. We talk. You so much as twitch the wrong way, and I drop you." "Careful," she says softly. "I might start liking your threats, human." An edge in her tone suggests it's more than sarcasm. There's a prowling curiosity laced in with the venom. He presses his palm against a sensor near the cabin door, and the lock beeps in recognition. The heavy wooden door swings open with a gust of warmth. She follows him in, footsteps silent. He keeps his rifle at the ready, glancing sidelong to watch her reaction to the small, rough-hewn interior, a single room with a stone fireplace, a narrow cot, and a wooden table. Sparse. Functional. The only real comfort is the steady fire crackling in the hearth. She sniffs at the air, clearly taking in the lingering smell of gun oil, half-eaten rations, and stale coffee. He sets his rifle on the table, not within immediate reach, but close enough. She sees the motion, arches an eyebrow, and shows him the faint hint of a savage smile. He can see the tension in her shoulders, the way she's ready to spring at any moment. That primal energy of hers hums through the space, as though the snow-caked fur on her arms is bristling in invisible waves. "Start talking," he says, crossing his arms. "Because my usual approach to bounties doesn't involve listening to sob stories. But you've got me curious." She straightens, trying to look unimpressed by the meager heat. "I'm not here to earn your sympathy. You want an explanation for why there's a price on me? Fine. My people want me back so they can force me into a breeding program. Something about preserving the line that..." Her jaw tightens, and the words grind to a halt, as if the reality of it still burns. She shakes her head. "I escaped. I don't belong to them. And I sure as hell don't belong to you." He regards her carefully, the smirk fading. "I'm no slaver. If that's what you're thinking." She casts a glance at his gear. "No. You're something else. A killer for hire. You don't capture to enslave, you capture to profit." His lips press into a thin line. "You're oversimplifying." But he can't deny that he's done exactly that for as long as he can remember. Make the kill or collect the bounty, and never mind the moral complexities. "You said your kind wants your bloodline? Why? What's so special about it?" Her chin lifts defiantly. "You humans call us the Husker, a savage race from the colder planet Arx. We have specialized genetics that let us endure extremes. Our lineage is carefully curated. Those in power want to ensure that our strongest lines remain under their control." He exhales, arms tightening over his chest. "Sounds like something big. Too big for me to get involved with." She huffs a laugh, derisive. "But here you are." His gaze narrows, drifting momentarily to the faint scratch marks on the table from an older scuffle, then back to her. "Yeah, here I am. And now I'm stuck with you in this cabin while a storm blows in. You want me to pretend I'm not interested in collecting your bounty?" She strides forward, each step deliberate, until she's close enough that he can feel the heat radiating from her body. She's a fraction shorter than him, but the way she holds herself makes the difference negligible. "You want me to pretend I'm not tempted to snap your neck for stepping in my way?" His jaw flexes. Adrenaline pulses through him at her challenge. "If you could, you would have done it already. I'm calculating." Her breath is warm against his chin. "Figuring out if there's another way." He matches her stare, letting the tension coil between them. The flicker of the fire illuminates the fur on her arms, and the carved lines of muscle along her shoulders. The combination of human and lupin traits sets his senses on edge. He knows she can sense his pulse, probably smell the faint sweat on his skin. He wonders what else her heightened abilities pick up, his subtle wariness. His flicker of curiosity? She opens her mouth to speak, but at that moment, an explosion echoes outside, somewhere in the woods. The ground trembles beneath their feet, shaking snow off the roof. Alarm sparks in her expression, and Cade's instincts go on high alert. Without hesitation, he snatches up the rifle, rams a new charge cell into place, and aims at the door. "You lead someone here?" Her eyes flash with something akin to anger. "They were tracking me before you ever showed up. If they found us, you've got yourself a bigger problem than me." He curses under his breath, stepping to the window. Outside, through the swirl of snow, he sees lights flicker, several figures moving swiftly among the dark trunks of the pines. "Looks like more than one. Armed too. They won't let me walk away a second time." She moves in beside him, her posture bristling. "And they'll kill you if you're in their path. You want that bounty on me? Fine. But you'd better be willing to fight for it." He flashes a grim smirk, adrenaline pumping. "I'm always ready for a fight." She snorts softly. "We'll see." They don't waste another breath. He tosses her a backup pistol from a chest near the table. She catches it with quick reflexes. For a split second, their eyes meet in understanding. Whatever they are to each other, they're also the only allies either of them has at this moment. The swirl of conflict, attraction, and mutual distrust is overshadowed by the immediate threat outside. Because if they don't cooperate, they'll both end up dead in the snow. A savage gleam lights up her eyes, and the corner of his mouth quirks in an echo of that feral intensity. Storm or no storm, bounty or no bounty, they're about to go to war with whatever force stalks them through these frozen woods. And despite the insane circumstances, some part of him relishes the idea of standing beside her, if only to see what havoc she unleashes when truly cornered. They push through the cabin door, bracing against a sudden gust of icy wind. The taste of cold air stings their lungs. Snow flurries whip around them. She crouches low, scanning the treeline, her heightened senses searching for the intruders. He stands at her back, rifle up, eyes narrowed. Another explosion rumbles in the distance, followed by the unmistakable ping of energy weapons. This is no random search party. Whoever came for her means business. She looks over her shoulder at him, a daring smile etched on her lips despite the dire predicament. Try to keep up. The tension between them is momentarily eclipsed by the raw exhilaration of battle. He can't help but grin back. Lead the way. They lunge into the storm, side by side, ready for whatever darkness lurks among those trees. Yet neither of them forgets that once this danger is over, they're still on opposite sides, predator and bounty hunter, or perhaps two predators circling the same piece of ground. But for now, survival demands they fight as one. And as the wind howls, carrying the scent of gunmetal and the promise of bloodshed, they both feel it, an unspoken, mutual awareness that something deeper than hostility burns between them. It's something neither can define, yet. They crouch behind a fallen pine, breath frosting in the cold air, the only cover from the approaching squad. Lights flicker through the trees, accompanied by the hiss of communication devices. He counts at least 5, maybe 6. Through the wind's howl, he picks up snatches of alien language and the crackle of an energy rifle being checked. These aren't amateurs. Their formation is disciplined, movement precise. Her ears flatten against her skull as she listens, every muscle taut. They're from my world, she murmurs, eyes scanning the silhouette of the lead figure. Hunters sent to bring me back, or kill me if I resist. He glances at her, noticing the subtle tremor in her arms, not from fear, but from coiled energy. Her entire being is wound tight, prepared to spring. You know their tactics? She nods. They'll spread out, try to encircle us. They'll flush us out with flash charges, disorient with sonic pulses, then move in for the capture. He tenses, scanning their surroundings for higher ground or a vantage point. And if we run? They'll track us. My scent. Your heat signature. We won't outrun them in this storm. He steels himself. Then we fight. She flicks him a sidelong glance, something like respect in her gaze. You really are a stubborn fool. He just smiles that dangerous smile of his. Been called worse. Checking his rifle, he ensures it's set to lethal discharge. Bounties be damned, if they're forcing this confrontation, he'll defend himself. He glances at her pistol, noticing she adjusts the settings. You sure about that? She inhales, the faintest hint of sadness crossing her features. They left me no choice. Without further words, they launch into motion. He fires a shot that illuminates the snowy clearing in a brief, blinding flash. One of the hunters staggers as the blast rips through a tree trunk, sending shards of wood flying. She seizes the moment, darting ahead with inhuman speed. Her movements are a blur even to his trained eyes, and all he can do is lay down cover fire. Energy beams sizzle through the air, passing mere inches from his head. The acrid scent of burning ozone taints the wind. She collides with the nearest hunter in a flurry of snow and savage fury. He hears the grunt of pain, sees the muzzle flash of a weapon discharged wildly into the sky. Her pistol is pressed tight to the hunter's armor, the shot muffled but lethal. When the body hits the ground, she's already pivoting, fur bristling with adrenaline. The second hunter tries to bring up a rifle, but Cade's well-placed shot tears through the muzzle, sending sparks flying. As the assailant staggers, Saska closes in, delivering a brutal blow to the temple. A crack echoes in the frigid air, and a wave of static pulses outward, a sonic device thrown by one of the hunters behind them. Cade's teeth rattle in his skull, his muscles turning to jelly for a heart-stopping instant. He fights to stay upright, but the force of the sonic wave drives him to one knee. He sees Saska stagger, her ears pinned flat, a look of agony distorting her features. Another wave hits, doubling him over, and for a heartbeat, darkness threatens to claim him. Then he feels a warm hand on his shoulder. She's dragging him behind an outcropping of rock, her breath harsh, as if her lungs are aflame. He coughs, tries to force air into his chest. She presses something into his hand, a small metallic device he recognizes as a sonic dampener. Fumbling, he attaches it behind his ear, feeling the jolt of equilibrium reestablish itself. She does the same, though her ears continue to twitch in pain. With the dampeners in place, the next sonic blast is reduced to a dull thud, allowing them to regain composure. 3 left. She hisses, voice raw. Focus on the one with the launcher. He nods, still tasting copper in his mouth from biting his tongue. Adrenaline surges anew, fueling him forward. He breaks cover, ignoring the cold that seeps through the tear in his jacket. The wind whips snow across his field of vision, but he spots the hulking figure with the sonic launcher, its silhouette framed by the flicker of a muzzle flash. Cade zeroes in, squeezes the trigger, and watches the bright arc of lethal energy slam into the attacker's chest. A strangled cry escapes the hunter before the body falls. Saska emerges behind the second-to-last hunter like a ghost, her pistol pressed to the base of the neck. A searing shot drops the target. Then, like a cornered beast, the final hunter charges her, a blade glinting in the half-light. She twirls aside, but the attacker's knife grazes her side. She snarls, a deep, guttural sound that sends a chill up Cade's spine. He lines up a shot but can't fire, she's too close, entangled with the enemy. Instead, he lunges forward, hooking his arm around the attacker's throat from behind, yanking them off Saska. She turns, spots the chance, and drives her claws into a gap in the hunter's armor. The figure crumples, body limp in the snow. Panting, Cade steps back, scanning the clearing. Steam rises from his rifle's muzzle. The forest is eerily silent now, save for the crackle of burning ozone from damaged weapons. "You okay?" he manages, turning to check on her. She's holding her side where the knife struck, and crimson stains marred the white fur. She grimaces, but her eyes remain fierce. "I've had worse." She glances around at the bodies. "You're not bad in a fight." He tries for a wry grin, but his lips feel numb. "Didn't really have a choice. They were better armed, had the element of surprise. We got lucky." She doesn't refute it. Instead, she sags slightly against a fallen trunk. Tension lines her face. The gash at her side needs tending, or she'll lose too much blood. Without hesitation, he slings the rifle over his shoulder and approaches, rummaging in a pouch for a medgel canister. He presses a gauze patch to her wound, then dabs the synthetic clotting agent. She winces, but doesn't pull away. The closeness is jarring after the violence, each breath bringing them face to face in the cold. Her hand tightens on his wrist. "I can handle." "Stop talking," he says, not unkindly. "It'll seal in a minute." His eyes meet hers, and the moment of mutual regard stretches thin, snapping only when she exhales and releases her grip on him. When the bleeding's under control, he helps her to her feet. She glances at the scattered bodies. "They're just the beginning. More will come." He nods, lips tightening. "You said so yourself? No running. So we have to figure out how to make them stop. That means going to the root of this. The ones who put the bounty on me." She clenches her jaw, a mix of rage and resignation. "I have to finish it once and for all." He studies her, aware of the spike of adrenaline still burning in his veins. The reality of stepping deeper into her world weighs on him. But the alternative is leaving her to be hunted, or trying to drag her back to the people who see her as nothing but a breeding tool. Somehow, the latter feels wrong now. He can't explain why. She's not just a target, she's something else, something unpredictable and compelling. "Fine," he says at last. "But don't expect me to go easy on you if you try to double-cross me." She bares her teeth in a semblance of a grin, canines flashing. "Likewise, human. Now let's get back inside before more of them show up." They trudge through the snow, leaving behind the slain. Each step crunches the crusted top layer of ice, and he remains on high alert, scanning the trees. She keeps close to his side, not in a gesture of trust, but out of necessity. The storm intensifies, swallowing their tracks as fast as they're made. By the time they reach the cabin, the bodies will be half buried in white, and the next group of pursuers might find them by following the trail of violence. Inside the cabin, the air feels almost too warm after the brutal cold. He lowers her onto a chair, then secures the door. She watches him as he returns to her side, rummaging for better medical supplies. Her eyes are intense, reflecting the dancing flames. He can sense her tension, her readiness to spring, but she allows him closer this time. He rolls up her fur-trimmed sleeve, revealing the edge of the wound that snakes across her ribs. As he applies the med-gel properly, she hisses at the stinging sensation. "Let me guess. You want some reward for playing nurse?" He shakes his head, focusing on sealing the laceration. "I want to live. And I want an explanation for the trouble I just dragged myself into." When he finishes, he steps back. The patch he applied glows faintly as it accelerates healing. "Tell me what's really going on." She flexes her arm, wincing slightly, but the bleeding has stopped. "I told you enough out there. Tell me more." He crosses his arms. "Because you and I both know that if you think you can ditch me later, you will. If I'm going to protect you from whatever that was, I need the truth." She looks away, lips pressed tight. For a moment, he wonders if she'll lash out or maintain her silence. Finally, she speaks, low and guarded. "My people want me back because I'm from one of the highest genetic lines in our empire. They believe I carry traits that will strengthen future generations. The expansions into harsher planetary environments need creatures like me, creatures who can survive cold, wind, hunger. They want me to breed more soldiers for them. Strong ones. Obedient ones." He's silent, letting the weight of her words settle. He almost says something about it being her problem, not his, but the memory of her bravely fighting by his side just minutes ago makes him hesitate. "And now they've put a price on you. Anyone who brings you back gets paid, no questions asked?" She nods. "To them, I'm livestock. The question is, what do you want from me?" It's a valid question. A single piece of him wonders if he should still deliver her for the bounty. That was his original job. But seeing the brutality of these hunters, their single-minded pursuit of enslaving her body and genes, gnaws at his conscience in a way he hasn't felt for years. "I don't know," he admits, surprising himself with the honesty. "But I'm not handing you over to them." Her gaze snaps to his. "Why not? That's the easiest payday you'll ever make." He shrugs, feeling a slow burn of anger at her suggestion. "Yeah, it might be easy. But I'm no slaver. And after what I've seen, I'd probably have to fight them, too, just to get my money. Maybe we can cut a deal." She snorts. "You want me to pay you to keep me free? I barely escaped with my life. I don't have your human currency." "Not money," he says quietly, then hesitates, because even he's not sure what he wants. "Information, maybe. Or an alliance. We've got a common enemy now." She studies him, eyes narrowed, as if trying to peel back the layers of his mind. "You're risking a lot siding with me." "Yeah, well, I've done dumber things for smaller reasons." The flicker of that old smirk reappears on his lips, though his eyes remain serious. "Look, if you want to go your own way, fine. But you saw how it went out there. You and I both almost died. Better odds if we watch each other's backs." Her lips purse. She's silent for a few heartbeats, the crackle of the fire filling the space between them. Then she stands, ignoring the lingering pain, and approaches him. Every step exudes that primal grace. He remains still, arms at his sides, letting her come close. The brush of her body heat is oddly comforting in the chill of this place. Her eyes dart down to the rifle near his hip, then back up to meet his gaze. "All right," she says finally. "But this is temporary. Once I settle this with my people, we go our separate ways." He exhales, not fully satisfied, but it's a start. "Fine by me." She takes one more step, close enough now that her breath warms his chin again, the tips of her black furred ears nearly brushing against him. "One more thing," she says, her voice a hair above a whisper. "Try to betray me, and I will kill you. No second chances." He nods, heartbeat thumping in his ears. "Likewise, Husker." The faintest twitch of her lips suggests she might be amused by his directness. Then she turns, heading toward the door. "We leave at first light. Storm or not. We need to move." He glances at the battered shutters, hearing the wind scream outside. "It's going to be a brutal night. We'll need to rest if we're going to survive out there." She doesn't argue, but there's a tension in her stance that says she'll sleep with one eye open. He doesn't blame her. Though he's decided not to deliver her for the bounty, the trust between them is hardly strong. Still, as she settles near the fire, curling her furred arms around her knees, he can't shake the sensation that the night just got a whole lot more interesting. And dangerous. Morning arrives in a riot of pale gray light diffused by swirling snow. The storm is relentless, but they push on anyway, forging a path through drifts that come up to their thighs. She takes the lead, her physiology better suited to the cold. He follows, footsteps clumsy compared to her near-silent trek. Every so often, she pauses, ears perked, scanning for threats. He listens for the hush that precedes an ambush, rifle at the ready. His breath comes in ragged bursts, visible in the frigid air. She seems less affected, though he can see the stiffening in her posture when the wind howls. Occasionally, they exchange curt words about direction or vantage points, but mostly they trudge in silence. By midday, they reach the lip of a wide ravine, its frozen river glinting below. A natural choke point. She scans it, then gestures for them to descend. Once on the river, the wind is slightly less punishing, shielded by high cliffs. But the ice beneath their feet creaks ominously. He tenses, expecting it to crack at any second. She glances back at him, a warning in her eyes. No sudden moves. They inch forward, spread out. The moment they near the opposite bank, a rumble echoes through the canyon walls. He stiffens, scanning the cliffs, expecting another ambush. Instead, a chunk of ice breaks under his boots, and he plunges up to his thigh in the frigid water. The shock jolts him, stealing his breath. She's at his side in an instant, grabbing hold of his arm and hauling him out with surprising strength. He gasps, teeth chattering, but he's alive, soaked from the waist down, yet not submerged completely. "Stupid," she mutters, but there's a flicker of concern behind her harsh tone. She yanks him onto the bank, ignoring his protests, and steers him toward a rocky overhang that offers scant shelter from the wind. He's trembling hard, lips turning blue. She strips off his outer layer, forcing him to wring out the sopping fabric. "Fire," he mumbles, trying to keep his teeth from clacking. "We need..." Before he can finish, her hands are already busy with a small device from her belt, generating a low heat field. She maneuvers him closer to it. The warmth is meager, but better than nothing. He notices her face is close to his, her breath mingling with his short gasps. Despite the dire situation, that same electric tension flares between them, as if proximity alone stokes some hidden current. She presses a blanket from her pack over his shoulders. "Keep still," she orders. He nods, focusing on steadying his breathing. Water drips from his pants, forming tiny icicles against the fabric. She crouches there, the thick fur on her arms stirring in the breeze, eyes scanning the ravine. She's both caretaker and sentinel, poised to attack if anything threatens. It strikes him as strangely intimate, this forced pause, the quiet swirl of snow around them, her fierce presence hovering protectively. After a few minutes, color returns to his lips, and he manages a weak grin. "So you do care?" She snorts, turning away. "I care about getting out of this alive. If you freeze to death, you're useless." He chuckles roughly, though it sends another shiver through him. "Sure. Whatever you say." She glances back. He thinks he catches the ghost of a smile, but it's gone too quickly to be certain. In any case, she doesn't deny his teasing. Instead, she keeps watch, ears pivoting at every shift in the wind. He's struck by how natural she looks in this environment, like she was born to stalk these frozen terrains, each flake of snow an ally rather than a hindrance. When he's warm enough to stand, they continue. The ravine curves, leading them toward a series of caves carved into the cliffside. She motions for silence, stepping gingerly through the deep drifts. He follows suit, picking his path carefully. The unspoken tension between them has begun to shift. He notices the way her posture relaxes slightly when she senses no immediate threat, the way her gaze lingers on him a beat longer than before. It's subtle, almost imperceptible, but it's there, an acknowledgement that they rely on each other now. They enter a cavern mouth, wide and dark, the walls painted with ice. Water drips from stalactites in slow, steady rhythms. She moves ahead, and he uses a flashlight to pierce the gloom. The air is marginally warmer inside, protected from the storm outside. She stops suddenly, holding up a hand. He freezes, scanning the darkness. Then he hears it, a faint hum of mechanical equipment deeper in. He tenses, exchanging a glance with her. Slipping behind a protruding boulder, they carefully inch forward. A soft glow emanates from further in, revealing a makeshift camp. Several crates, some advanced scanning gear, and a battered transport sled line the cave floor. A single figure moves among them, a tall, imposing presence clad in layered armor. Saska's lips curl back, and she hisses a barely contained snarl. He can sense her immediate recognition. This isn't just any hunter, this is someone she knows. Saskara, the figure calls, voice reverberating off the cavern walls. I know you're here. I've been tracking you for days. Have you tired of running yet? Cade darts his gaze to Saska, realizing that's likely her full name. She seems startled, the fur on her arms rising. When she speaks, her voice is taut with old bitterness. I told you never to call me that. A rumbling laugh echoes. You can't outrun your lineage, pup. You were bred for greatness, and we are not done with you. Come, let's end this charade before more lives are lost. Cade glances at her, expecting an explanation, but she ignores him, stepping into the open with the pistol raised. Her posture is defiant, yet he can see the tremor in her shoulders. Whoever this is, they hold a piece of her past, possibly something that digs deeper than mere duty. You want me so badly? She spits, voice echoing around them. Try and take me, Karav. The armored figure, Karav, turns slowly, revealing a visage marred by old scars. His eyes gleam with triumph at the sight of her. As you wish. Cade moves, slipping into a better flanking position. He aims the rifle at Karav's center mass, waiting for the right moment. But Karav must have a detection device or heightened senses of his own, because he shifts, raising a gauntlet that fires a burst of energy. Cade dives aside, nearly colliding with a stalagmite. Sparks rain down, lighting the cave with strobe-like flashes. Saska charges, unleashing a flurry of shots from her pistol. Karav's armor deflects most of the blasts, though one shot glances off his shoulder. He snarls, lunging forward in a blur of motion that challenges even her reflexes. She manages to roll under the swing of his arm, then scrambles behind a crate. Cade, regaining his balance, fires a precise shot that dents Karav's side plating, drawing a growl of pain or frustration. You've taken help from a human bounty hunter? Karav roars, eyes flicking between them. Your shame is boundless, pup. Saska pops up from behind the crate, firing again. Better a human than a murderer like you. Cade curses under his breath. This guy is well equipped. The energy shield integrated into that armor could be a problem. He carefully lines up another shot, waiting for the shield to flicker. Saska distracts him with a barrage of pistol fire. The moment the shield dips, Cade squeezes the trigger. The beam lances across the cave, striking Karav's left thigh. Sparks fly, and Karav staggers, letting out a furious snarl. That's when Saska seizes the advantage. She leaps onto the crate, then springs through the air with predatory grace, slamming into Karav. They tumble across the cavern floor in a vicious struggle, claw against reinforced gauntlet. The sound of metal scraping against stone and the echo of snarls fill the space. For a second, she manages to pin his arm, and Cade thinks she's won, until Karav rams his helmet forward, cracking her across the forehead. She reels back with a pained cry. Cade shifts forward, driving the butt of his rifle against Karav's exposed midsection. The blow lands, doubling Karav over. Another shot from Saska's pistol hits his side, making him yelp in agony. Yet he's still not down. He backhands Cade hard enough to send him sprawling. Pain explodes along Cade's jaw, and he tastes blood. When he manages to refocus, he sees Karav looming over Saska, who's cornered against a rocky wall. Something in Cade snaps. He charges, hooking an arm around Karav's neck in a chokehold, pulling with all his might. The big alien staggers, clawing at Cade's arm. "Get clear!" Cade shouts to Saska, voice strained. She doesn't hesitate. She launches herself upward, delivering a merciless kick to Karav's chest. The combined force topples him. Cade collapses with them in a heap of limbs, but quickly scrambles free, aiming the rifle point blank at Karav's visor. "No," he growls, chest heaving. "Give me one good reason not to put a hole through your skull." Before Karav can respond, Saska steps in, breathing ragged, face bruised, but eyes burning with fury. She grips her pistol with both hands, pointing it at Karav's heart. "He doesn't get a reason," she rasps, voice brimming with pent-up vengeance. "He's the one who tracked me, orchestrated hunts that killed my friends, forced me into these bitter corners." Cade sees her finger tighten on the trigger. Part of him wants to let her do it. Another part realizes the ramifications. If Karav is high in their command structure, killing him might turn the entire empire into a relentless vendetta. "Saska," he murmurs, uncertain. "Think this through." She doesn't lower the weapon. Her arm trembles with the weight of the moment. "I'm done thinking." Karav coughs, spitting blood. "Go ahead. Kill me. More will come. They will never stop." That's the final push she needs. She fires, a single shot that penetrates the weakened armor and stops Karav's heart. The echo reverberates, a sharp punctuation in the hush of the cave. Karav's body slumps, and his eyes dim. For a moment, everything stands still. Then she exhales, shoulders sagging, tears mixing with the sweat on her brow. Cade doesn't speak. He rises, scanning the entrance for any reinforcements. None come. They're alone with the body, and with the final act of violence that just transpired. Saska's breath comes in shallow bursts, and she staggers back, almost losing her grip on the pistol. Cade gently takes it from her hand. Her eyes flick to his, raw with conflicting emotions, relief, guilt, triumph, sorrow. She visibly swallows, trying to gather herself. "It's done," she says, voice hollow. "He was the one leading the chase. Without him, the others might scatter." Cade nods, not entirely convinced it'll be that easy. But he keeps the thought to himself. Instead, he offers a hand. She looks at it as though it's an alien gesture, but eventually takes it, allowing him to help her stand. Her legs are unsteady, not from physical harm alone but from the emotional weight pressing down on her. They exchange no words as they gather Karav's scanner and check the data logs. It seems to contain coordinates and a list of other hunters. She erases as much of it as she can, hopefully to slow any future pursuit. Then they back away, leaving the body in the cold hush of the cavern. The bond between them has deepened, though neither fully acknowledges it yet. It's there in the way she leans on him for a moment longer than necessary, and in the way he bristles with protective instinct whenever the slightest sound echoes around them. They exit the cave into the swirling storm once more, hearts heavy and steps uneven. She clutches the side of her head where Karav hit her, and he steadies her. Despite her remarkable endurance, that blow was no small thing. As they trudge along the cliff face, he glances at her with concern. "You going to make it?" She gives a weak nod. "I'll survive. I always do." He doesn't press further. It's not just her physical injuries that worry him. He senses something in her has fractured in that cave, the final vestige of whatever ties she had to her people, snapped by the pull of a trigger. In a sense, she's free now. But freedom can be a lonely, haunting path. She stares straight ahead, but her eyes are distant, as though searching for a purpose that's just out of reach. He leads her to a small overhang where they can hunker down for the night. He lights a portable heater, and they share a ration pack in silence. The wind howls, swirling snowdrifts against the rock. The only light comes from the faint glow of the heater. She rubs her bruised forehead, wincing. He reaches into his pack, pulls out another small med patch, and hands it to her without a word. She presses it against her temple, then glances at him. Her eyes, even shadowed, hold an intensity that sparks something in his gut. "I didn't think you'd stop me," she says quietly, referencing the moment before she pulled the trigger. He shrugs. "Didn't want to stop you. Just wanted you to know the consequences." She exhales, nodding slowly. "I appreciate that. I don't regret it, though. He deserved worse." Silence stretches between them, thick with everything unspoken: guilt, relief, an undercurrent of something intimate that neither wants to define yet. He's hyper-aware of her presence, the subtle twitch of her fur, the way her eyes reflect the minimal light. She's wounded, physically and emotionally, but still radiates that fierce energy. When she finally speaks again, her voice is subdued. "What happens now? The rest of them might still come." He meets her gaze, expression carefully measured. "We pick them off if they do. Or we find a place to hide until the storm passes. After that, well, we see this through." A flicker of tension plays across her features. "That could mean traveling into the heart of my people's territory. Exposing ourselves to more danger." He smirks, though his eyes remain serious. "I'm not afraid of danger." She almost smiles, but it's laced with fatigue. "I can tell. But Cade, once we do this, once we strike at the heart, you'll be branded as an enemy to my kind too. There won't be any turning back." He holds her gaze. "I've got nothing to lose." She falls silent again, and he shifts his attention to the swirl of snow outside. Eventually, she slumps back against the stone wall, letting her eyes drift shut. Her breathing evens out, though her posture remains tense. He stands watch, rifle resting across his lap, thoughts churning with the realization that he's crossed a line he never intended. She's more than a bounty. Now she's an ally, and perhaps something else. The night drags on, the wind thrashing the cliffs. He dozes fitfully, but every time a gust whistles oddly, he snaps awake, finger on the trigger. Yet no ambush comes. The next morning breaks cold and clear, revealing a sky of pale gold and azure. The storm has finally passed. He gently nudges her awake. She stirs, blinking away sleep. For a second, she looks vulnerable in the morning light, formatted with dried blood, eyes ringed with exhaustion. Without words, they gather their gear. She tests her injuries, wincing but pushing forward. He insists on rechecking her bandages. She lets him, which in itself is a small surrender of her usual iron dominance. When he finishes, she stands, rolling her shoulders as though preparing for another fight. "We head north," she says, indicating deeper into the mountainous terrain. "There's an outpost where some of my father's former allies might still live. If we can convince them to help me break the Empire's grip, it might stop the hunts." He arches a brow. "Father? Are you sure they'll side with you?" She grimaces, adjusting the strap across her chest. "Not entirely. But they hated the breeding programs more than anyone. If they're still alive, we have a chance. Then we go north." He agrees. They set out, leaving the overhang behind. The snow crunches beneath their boots and paws. Her movements remain strangely silent despite the conditions. The tension between them has shifted into a tenuous camaraderie. Neither calls the other friend, but neither denies the growing partnership. Every so often, their gazes catch, and an undeniable spark flickers there. It's a mixture of grudging respect, curiosity, and something deeper, a chord of attraction that they both sense but refuse to name. They make camp that evening near a half-frozen waterfall, the thunderous sound of cascading water shrouding their movements. He sets up a minimal perimeter alarm, the best he can do with limited supplies, while she hunts for edible flora in the immediate vicinity. Their conversation is staccato and practical: directions, watch shifts, ration sharing. Yet beneath each exchange is an undercurrent of unspoken tension. She tests him in small ways, stepping into his personal space, or making a provocative comment that suggests she's gauging his reactions. He tries to keep his composure. He's not about to let his guard down. She's still an alien warrior who could shred him if she truly wanted. But there's a lingering memory of the night they fought side by side, and the way her breath rasped against his ear. He feels the odd pull of it. By the time they settle around a small fire, the air between them crackles with something unspoken. She tears off a piece of dried meat, chewing thoughtfully, eyes never leaving his face. "You're a puzzle," she remarks, her voice husky in the silence of the night. He lifts a brow. "How so? You had every reason to hand me over, or kill me. Yet here you are, risking everything for reasons I can't fathom." His lips twitch into that signature smirk. "Maybe I just like a challenge." She huffs, a sound somewhere between amusement and irritation. "Humans usually talk more about heroism, or morals. You're not exactly righteous, but neither are you a pure mercenary. So what drives you?" He takes a moment before responding, staring at the flames. "My home was destroyed by an alien war a few years back. I fought in it, lost people. After that, I stopped caring about causes. I only took jobs that paid. Less heartbreak that way." He shifts his gaze to her. "But this business with you, it's not just a simple bounty. It's bigger, more twisted. Something about it doesn't sit right. I don't want to be part of your people's monstrous plan." She studies him, a hint of softness penetrating her steely facade. "I see." He shrugs. "That, and you're the first interesting thing I've encountered in a long time." She blinks, then lets out a short laugh, devoid of malice. "I could kill you where you sit." "Yeah," he concedes. "But you won't." She leans forward, firelight dancing across her fur, highlighting the graceful arch of her cheekbones, the powerful line of her jaw. "Don't be so sure, human." He lets the tension hang in the air, refusing to break eye contact. There's a moment where it feels as though they might clash again, physically or verbally, but neither moves. The stalemate is charged, and he feels his heartbeat quicken. The knowledge of her strength, her unpredictable nature, and the dark path that led her here only fuels the strange attraction he's trying to deny. Finally, she stands abruptly, restless energy rolling off her in waves. "I'll check the perimeter," she mutters, turning away from the fire. He watches her go, every line of her body taut and poised. There's something undeniably magnetic about her, even though he knows better than to trust that entirely. A half-smile tugs at his lips when she disappears into the darkness, leaving him alone with the crackle of flames and a swirl of conflicting thoughts. Night deepens. The waterfall's roar soothes him into a doze despite his efforts to stay alert. He wakes with a start when she returns, her movements noiseless except for a subtle crunch of snow underfoot. She drops beside him, close enough that he can feel her warmth. When he glances at her, she's staring into the fire, eyes distant. He clears his throat softly. "Perimeter clear?" She nods. "For now." A pause, then she speaks quietly. "Back in that cave, when you told me to think about the consequences of killing Karav." She trails off, lips pressing together as though uncertain how to continue. Eventually, she forces the words out. "Thank you. I needed to hear it, even if I didn't listen." He regards her in the flickering light. "No regrets?" She exhales. "No. But it was a line crossed. There's no going back to how things were. I'm not sure I realized that until afterward." He nods, recognizing the weight of her actions. He's killed plenty of targets, but for her, this was personal in a way that possibly shook her entire foundation. That's what war does. Leaves you with choices you can't undo. She closes her eyes briefly. War. Breeding. Politics. It's all twisted. Her voice edges on bitterness. I just want to live free. Without being hunted like some prized broodmare. Silence settles, broken only by the rush of water and crackle of burning wood. He can feel the frustration radiating off her, along with the vulnerability she struggles to hide. Gently, he reaches out, resting a hand near her furred forearm. He doesn't touch her, but the gesture is close enough to show empathy without crowding her. She opens her eyes, glancing at his hand before meeting his gaze. Her expression is guarded, but there's a flicker of something deeper. Hesitancy. Curiosity. Perhaps even longing. Slowly she edges closer, so his palm brushes against the silky white fur. The contact sends a surprising jolt through him. Her skin beneath the fur is warm and firm, her heartbeat thrumming just out of reach. He fights the urge to pull away, not wanting to spook her. Instead, he lifts his gaze to hers, and what he sees there shakes him. Fear and desire mingle, each vying for dominance. Her chest rises and falls in shallow breaths, and he becomes uncomfortably aware of his own accelerating pulse. They're so close that he catches the faint scent of her, an elusive blend of wild musk and something uniquely alien. The moment stretches, tension coiling tighter, a silent battle of wills. Then she shifts, pressing closer so they're nearly face to face. A low growl hums in her throat, not entirely threatening, more a warning of the fire that crackles just beneath her skin. He's uncertain if she means to bare her teeth or lean in. His mind flashes with the memory of how she pinned him before, how quickly that primal strength could end him. Yet, instead of violence, she hovers there, breath ghosting against his lips. He can feel the trembling in her frame, or maybe it's his own. Slowly, almost painfully so, she lowers her head, brushing her nose against his cheek in a tentative show of closeness. His breath catches, and the world narrows to that single point of contact, her soft exhale warming his skin. It isn't a kiss exactly, more a gentle nudge, as though testing his reaction. He lifts a hand to cradle the back of her head, brushing against the fur at her nape. A small sound escapes her, somewhere between a sigh and a snarl, and she draws back, eyes stormy with conflicting emotions. For a second, he wonders if he's gone too far. But she doesn't strike. Instead, she licks her lips, a gesture oddly human yet entirely animalistic in its intensity. "I can't afford weakness," she whispers, voice thick with tension. He swallows, letting his hand fall away. "This isn't weakness," he manages, the words coming out as a hoarse murmur. She stares at him, the golden firelight reflecting in her eyes. Then she tears her gaze away, rising abruptly. "I need to sleep," she mutters, stepping away from the circle of firelight. The cold night air rushes in where her warmth once was. He remains seated, heart pounding, a swirl of unprocessed adrenaline in his veins. She settles herself a few paces away, back turned to him, arms wrapped around her knees. He can still hear her breathing. It takes a long time for either of them to drift off. Dawn arrives with a pallid sky that masks the sun behind clouds. They set out again, forging deeper into the mountains, exchanging few words. The unspoken tension from the previous night lingers, like a storm cloud waiting to break. He notices her occasional furtive glance, as if she's assessing whether he'll bring it up. He notices, too, the subtle flush in her cheeks whenever their eyes meet. Something has changed, though neither addresses it directly. They just keep moving. By midday, the terrain grows increasingly treacherous. She leads him up winding cliff paths that test both their endurance. He tries not to show how much the altitude strains him, but she seems to sense it anyway, slowing her pace just enough for him to catch his breath. They eventually crest a ridge, revealing a sprawling valley below, a patchwork of iced-over lakes, dense pines, and a scattering of structures that might be outposts. She surveys the landscape with a critical eye. "Down there. That's our best chance." He peers over her shoulder. "You said your father's allies might still be around. Which one is it?" "Hard to say from here. They were nomads, moving around these valleys. But if they've established a base, it would be near water." She points to a partially frozen lake at the valley's center. "We start there." They descend carefully, aware that one misstep could send them tumbling. The path zigzags down, passing through pockets of dense forest. Late afternoon light wanes rapidly in this region, and by the time they reach the valley floor, dusk is thickening. Snow flurries begin anew, dusting everything in a fine white veil. They skirt the edge of the lake, searching for signs of habitation. At first, it seems deserted, just endless ice and towering pines. Then she halts, ears perked, and signals him to listen. He strains his ears. At first, all he hears is the moan of wind through trees, the groan of ice shifting. Then, faintly, a mechanical whir, like a generator or some low-energy device. They move toward the sound, weapons ready. She leads, gliding across the snow with uncanny stealth, while he tries to mimic her footsteps. Soon, they spot a cluster of camouflaged structures, half buried in the drifts. Dim lights glow from narrow windows. She signals him to wait, then creeps closer. He watches her approach the nearest building, scanning for traps or guards. Her posture is tense, tail, if she has one, hidden by her black outfit, likely bristling. After a moment, she circles back to him. No sign of an immediate guard. Let's see if anyone's home. Cautiously, they step inside the largest structure. It's a rudimentary shelter with thick insulated walls, a single corridor leading deeper in. The whirring sound is louder now. They move past stacked crates and equipment covered in tarps. She runs a hand over one of the crates, brushing aside dust. This is Husker Tech. They were here, or still are. Cade nods, swallowing. The place feels abandoned, yet not entirely. A tension presses on his senses, as though someone might leap out at any second. They continue, following the corridor until it opens into a wide, dome-like chamber. A single figure stands at a console, back turned. She stiffens at the sight of them, ears pricking up. Before Saska can speak, the figure whirls, raising a small device that glows with contained energy. The figure is another female Husker, older than Saska by perhaps a decade, with streaks of silver in her fur. Shock flashes across her features when she sees Saska. You're alive! She breathes, lowering the device. Saska's voice wavers, betraying a ripple of emotion. Larina. Larina eyes Cade warily, then focuses on Saska again. We heard rumors you escaped the breeding camps. Some said you were dead. I half believed it. Saska takes a step forward. I managed. Are the others here? Larina's expression darkens. Scattered. Hunted. But we're not finished yet. She nods at Cade. Who's this? A human pet? Cade bristles, but Saska raises a hand to calm him. He's an ally. That's all you need to know. Larina smirks, though there's no real humor in it. I never thought I'd see the day when you trust a human. Cade crosses his arms, letting out a slow breath. Trust might be a strong word. Saska ignores the remark. We need your help. Karav is dead, but the Empire still wants me. They won't stop until I'm either captured or they have my bloodline. Larina's gaze flickers with surprise at the mention of Karav's death. She sets down the device, turning fully to face them. You killed Karav? That's significant. He was one of the Empire's top enforcers. They'll send more. Which means we have very little time. Saska nods. So you see why we came. We want to shut down the program, break their hold. Larina's eyes narrow. Easier said than done. They have entire fleets, outposts across multiple systems. You want to free our people? We need an army. Cade exhales softly. We don't have an army. Just us. The older Husker tilts her head. Unless you can rally the clans that remain in hiding. She looks at Saska. Your father had influence, but that was years ago. Most of his allies are dead or in chains. Saska's jaw clenches. Then we find whoever's left. We give them a reason to fight. We show them the Empire can be hurt. Larina regards her with a mix of admiration and concern. You really believe that, after all this time? She squares her shoulders. I have to. A hush settles in the chamber. Finally, Larina sighs. All right. I'll signal who I can. Most are scattered among these mountains, but there may be a few who remember your father's name with respect. Stay here tonight. We'll plan. Saska's posture relaxes minutely. Thank you. Larina gives her a tight nod, then her gaze shifts to Cade once more. You sure you can trust him? Saska's eyes flick to him, something indefinable in her expression. He's proved himself in battle. That's enough for now. Larina shrugs. Suit yourself? Just remember, humans have their own agendas. Cade holds back a snide remark, because picking a fight here might jeopardize their chances of forging an alliance. But inwardly he bristles. He doesn't need to be reminded of how many times he's played the mercenary. For now, though, they need these people. They spend the rest of the evening in tense discussions about the Empire, possible clan hideouts, and the feasibility of rallying them. Saska speaks passionately, describing how she killed Karav and how that might spark others to believe the Empire isn't invincible. Larina remains cautious, though there's a flicker of hope in her eyes. Cade mostly listens, interjecting logistical points about weapons and strategy. By the time they retire, exhaustion weighs on them all. Saska and Cade are offered a small side room to rest. It's Spartan, just a pair of cots and minimal lighting. She collapses onto one, rolling her sore shoulders with a grimace. He moves to the other, removing the heavier parts of his gear. They avoid each other's gaze, both recalling the previous night when tension nearly snapped into something more. He lies down, letting out a tired sigh. At least we have a roof over our heads. She nods, eyes drifting shut. Small mercies. Moments pass in silence, and he's almost asleep when her voice slices through the quiet. Cade? Yeah? He murmurs, eyes still closed. You saved my life. Again. He cracks an eye open. You saved mine just as much. Figure we're square. A faint breath of laughter escapes her. Fine. Sleep, human. He nearly smiles, drifting off. Despite the turmoil, the conflict, and the uncertain future, there's a sense of unity forming. Whether they like it or not, they're in this together now, tied by necessity, fueled by a growing spark neither fully comprehends. And as his consciousness ebbs away, he wonders how long they can deny the pull that's steadily tightening between them. They rise before dawn at Larina's insistence. Outside, a handful of other Huskers straggle in, alerted by whatever signals she sent. It's a small group, maybe a dozen souls at most, ragged from years of hiding, their eyes reflecting both weariness and a spark of defiance. Some greet Saska with respect, remembering her father's name. Others eye Cade warily, uncertain of a human's place among them. Breakfast is a Spartan affair. While they eat, Larina lays out a potential route to the next cluster of hideouts. Saska nods, occasionally exchanging glances with Cade as if checking his reaction. He keeps his thoughts to himself. All he knows is they'll be trekking deeper into dangerous territory, relying on these ragtag survivors to help them mount an improbable resistance. Yet he has no better plan, and there's an odd sense of purpose in following Saska's lead. By midday, they're on the move again, this time accompanied by half a dozen Husker. The rest remain behind to fortify the outpost. They cross the frozen lake, forging their own path. Saska and Larina take point, conversing in low tones, occasionally breaking into their native tongue. Cade trails behind, scanning the horizon for threats. The biting wind picks up again, lashing them with stinging flurries. But these newcomers handle it with the same lupin grace Saska possesses, bounding through snowdrifts with minimal effort. He stumbles over hidden ice, nearly losing his footing. A hand grips his elbow, steadying him. He looks up to find Saska's eyes, faint concern within them. She smirks. Try not to break your neck, human. He pushes off her grip with a small grin. I'll manage. Larina calls them forward. The group descends a slope toward another cluster of trees. Suddenly, a volley of blaster fire erupts from somewhere up ahead. The Huskers scatter, each finding cover behind boulders or thick trunks. Cade dives behind a fallen log, pulse pounding. It seems they're under attack again, though whether it's Empire forces or something else remains to be seen. Saska signals for quiet. They inch forward, rifles at the ready. Another barrage rings out, splintering bark. Cade notices that the shots aren't aimed precisely, they're more like warning fire. He sets his jaw, scanning for the source. Through a gap in the trees, he spots a fortified position, a collapsed ruin with a vantage over the path. A figure stands above it, shouting in Husker tongue, though Cade can't parse the words. Larina mutters. It's another clan, paranoid after repeated attacks. Let me handle this. Saska shakes her head. No. Let me. Before Larina can protest, Saska steps into the open. Immediately, shots whiz past her. She raises her arms, showing she's unarmed, though Cade knows she still has a pistol on her hip. She yells something in their language, voice carrying over the howling wind. The shooting ceases, replaced by agitated muttering from the ruin. Then, a group of Husker, 5 or 6, similarly gaunt and wary, emerges, weapons still raised. Cade tenses, ready to spring if they fire at her. But after a tense exchange of words, one of them lowers his rifle and approaches. He's scarred, with an ear half-torn. Saska stands her ground. The two converse in hushed but intense tones, gesturing toward the small force behind them. Cade can't catch every word, but he picks up enough to sense that Saska is explaining her plan, claiming she wants to strike back at the Empire. Eventually, the scarred Husker growls something, then gestures for the rest to follow him. The standoff breaks. Cade exhales a breath he didn't know he was holding. The newly encountered clan merges with their group, forging an uneasy alliance as the swirling storm intensifies. Once again, Saska has proven she can bend hearts or at least convince them to open a door. And with each encounter, Cade feels the web of her influence expand. As they press on, the day fades into a blur of cold and cautious progress. By nightfall, they reach another concealed hideout, hidden within a narrow canyon. Fires burn inside, casting flickering shadows across the rough walls. Tension eases as the newcomers recognize kindred faces among Larina's group. A semblance of communal relief passes through them. They share meager food and gather around the flames for warmth. Cade stands near the edge, not wanting to crowd them. He sees how they greet Saska, tentatively at first, then with an undercurrent of respect. Stories pass between them, recounting how Karav was killed. Each time they mention it, the group's morale seems to lift. Hope is a fragile thing, but here, in the darkness, it's igniting. The spark is Saska. For the first time, Cade wonders if she's more than just an escaped prize. She might be the key to unifying these scattered Husker. She catches his eye from across the cave, and a small smile tugs at her lips. He returns it, acknowledging the bond that's quietly formed between them. After the informal gatherings, the group disperses, leaving them alone by one of the fires. He's about to speak when she closes the distance between them, stepping into his personal space. Her voice is low, so only he can hear. Thank you for backing me up out there. He tilts his head. Didn't do much. You're the one who convinced them. She glances away. It helps to have someone at my side, especially a human. Reminds them this war isn't just us against the galaxy. He studies her face in the firelight, recalling the moments they nearly tore each other apart, and how they've now become something like partners. The tension that thrums between them is still there, sharper than ever after days of forced proximity and shared danger. He notices the slight flush in her cheeks as her gaze flicks to his lips, then back to his eyes, as if fighting an internal battle. Cade, she murmurs. There's something about this. She breaks off, struggling to articulate. I don't want you to think I'm using you. He exhales softly, shifting closer so their arms brush. I know. But let's be honest. We're both using each other in some way. For survival. For this cause. Maybe for more. She closes her eyes briefly, as if pained. My people, my biology. It's not just the Empire that sees me as breeding stock. These instincts run deep. I have impulses. Her voice shakes slightly with the admission. I've tried to bury them my whole life, but being around you, it's harder. Sometimes, it feels like I'm fighting myself. His pulse quickens. He remembers the electric jolt of her breath against his skin, the primal surge whenever they clash or stand too close. I won't ask you to fight them, he says quietly, aware of the raw edge in his tone. But I won't force you either. He stops, realizing that any direct declaration might be too much. We can figure this out. She draws in a shaky breath, stepping closer until they're separated by less than a heartbeat of space. The warmth of her body, combined with the flicker of the nearby fire, makes his head spin. Her scent envelopes him, that subtle musk that once alarmed him now addictive. She lifts a hand, brushing her knuckles along his jaw where the bruise from a prior fight still lingers. The gentleness catches him off guard. A small sound escapes her throat, a blend of frustration and longing. You really don't care that I'm... He doesn't let her finish. He closes the gap, kissing her with a fierce hunger that's been building for days. It's not gentle. Her lips part against his, and he catches the faint taste of blood and raw desire. She gasps, nails digging into his arms. For a moment, it's like the battle scenes they've lived through, all aggression and suppressed need. He expects her to shove him away or growl in protest, but she doesn't. Instead, she presses closer, returning the kiss with a fervor that borders on desperation. When they finally break apart, both are breathing hard. Her pupils are dilated, and he can see the faint tremor in her limbs. She rests her forehead against his, those pointed ears twitching. He brushes strands of her hair aside, marveling at how something so fierce can be so vulnerable in this moment. Cade, she whispers. I. Her words are lost as one of the Husker calls her name from across the cavern. They jolt apart, tension flaring at being caught. She steps away, clearing her throat. A flicker of irritation crosses her features, but she smooths it away as she goes to address the newcomer. Cade stands there, heart hammering, lips tingling from the heat of her kiss. An empty ache settles in his chest, like a hunger that's only been teased. He exhales slowly, pushing the sensation down. There's no time for indulgence. They have a war to plan. Hours later, they gather in a small alcove off the main cavern for a war council of sorts. The newly assembled clans each have leaders representing them. Saska stands at the head, wearing her bruises and half-healed wounds like badges of honor. Larina flanks her, arms crossed, expression stern. Cade stays back, near a rocky pillar, letting the Husker handle the politics. He's an outsider here, but he listens intently, rifle slung across his back. Discussions swirl around the practicality of launching raids, spreading word to other hideouts, and establishing safe passage for noncombatants. Some worry about the Empire's next move now that Karav is gone. Others want to strike preemptively, seizing a hub facility rumored to store genealogical data crucial for the breeding program. Saska's presence galvanizes them, her words firm and unwavering. She speaks with a passion that rouses hope, cautioning them that failure means indefinite subjugation. Her father's legacy, plus her personal testimony of the Empire's cruelty, ignites something in these worn survivors. At one point, someone questions her plan to involve a human mercenary. Cade braces himself, but Saska silences them with a cold glare. He's proven himself at my side, she states. Anyone with a complaint can face me in the ring. No one challenges her further. By the time the council ends, a rough strategy emerges. Gather more allies, then converge on the Empire's nearest data vault to destroy or steal the records. If successful, it will cripple the ability to track or forcibly breed further lines of Husker. It's a bold, dangerous move, but the seeds of unity are sown. A date is set for the initial mobilization. The clan leaders disperse, preparing to spread the word. Saska remains behind, leaning on a stone ledge, staring at a crude map. Her shoulders slump a fraction, exhaustion settling in. Cade approaches, stepping carefully so as not to startle her. You sure about all this? He asks quietly. She runs a hand across her face. No. But it's the only way. If we do nothing, the Empire continues unchecked. I can't live with that. He nods. I'll be there. She looks at him, eyes searching. Even though it means no bounty, no easy money? He smirks. I think we're past that. She exhales, tension easing from her posture. We need rest. Tomorrow we start recruiting in earnest. He nods, and they walk away from the map, side by side. Yet the memory of their kiss lingers in the space between them. As they retire to their quarters for the night, he can't help but wonder if they'll pick up where they left off, or if duty will keep them locked in a perpetual cycle of near misses and stolen moments. Their sleeping arrangements are the same as before, 2 cots in a cramped side chamber. He wonders if she'll maintain the distance she did last night. Once they're alone, the hush is punctured only by the drip of melting ice and the distant murmur of Husker voices. She hesitates, standing in the faint glow of a single overhead lamp. The bruises on her arms look stark in this light, and the tension in her jaw is evident. A swirling mix of weariness and desire floods him. He steps closer, brushing the back of his knuckles across her cheek. She doesn't pull away, though her gaze flicks to his mouth. "I'm sore," she murmurs, "inside and out." "Then rest," he replies softly, though his heart pounds. "We both need it." She nods, swallowing. But as he turns to his cot, she grabs his wrist. He looks back, eyebrows raised. A heartbeat passes before she leans in, pressing her forehead to his. "I can't keep running from this," she whispers, voice trembling with the effort of the admission. He nods, not trusting himself to speak. Slowly, her hand slides up his arm, a tentative caress that sends warmth through him. Her lips part, and he tilts his head, meeting her mouth in a soft, tentative brush. It's different from the earlier desperate kiss, but no less electric. She sighs against him, sinking into his arms. He's keenly aware of every bruise on her body, every ache on his own, and how improbable this moment is. Yet they cling to it, letting exhaustion and emotional need override caution. Her fingers tangle in his hair, pulling him closer. He responds in kind, resting his hands on her hips. Their breaths mingle, hearts thundering. She gives a small, pained moan when he accidentally presses too hard on a bruised spot, and he eases back, an apology on his lips. But she shakes her head, eyes blazing. "Don't stop," she rasps, hooking a leg around his calf, as if challenging his moment of gentleness. He tightens his hold, deepening the kiss. Her growl reverberates through both of them, a low, throaty sound that betrays her feral nature. She tugs his jacket down, exposing the line of his collarbone, pressing her mouth to his skin. A tremor of pleasure jolts through him, mixed with the sting of old wounds. They stagger backward against the stone wall, a precarious tangle of limbs, each refusing to yield control. When they finally part for air, she rests her forehead on his chest. He can feel her trembling, and he isn't sure if it's from desire or the weight of everything they've endured. With uncharacteristic gentleness, he tilts her chin, urging her to meet his eyes. "Saska," he murmurs, voice ragged. "We." She silences him with another fierce kiss. It's messy, primal, and he can't help responding in kind. Every battle, every near-death scrape, funnels into this moment. They're both exhausted, battered, uncertain if tomorrow will bring victory or a swift end. That shared vulnerability kindles a heat that burns through their usual caution. She bites his lower lip, not enough to draw blood, but enough to claim him. He groans, pressing his body against hers, feeling the warmth of her fur, the rippling muscle beneath. In the suffocating press of that hidden chamber, they learn each other in halting, desperate motions. The cots are shoved aside, replaced by the rough embrace of stone walls. Soft gasps and growls echo off the ceiling. It's not gentle. It's a clash of wills and longing, each refusing to fully surrender, yet both too caught in the blaze to hold back. Their injuries protest, flaring pain that only spurs them to cling tighter. At some point, he mutters her name, voice cracking with equal parts pain and need. She answers with a throaty rumble, nails scoring lightly across his back. The tension coils to a snapping point, and they succumb to it, forging a moment of intimacy as intense as any battlefield. When the storm of it finally ebbs, they collapse against each other, breathing heavily, bodies slick with sweat despite the chill in the air. He cradles her face, brushing aside damp strands of hair. Her ears flick, eyes half-lidded with exhaustion. A shaky laugh escapes him. "I think we broke the bed," he mumbles, glancing at the discarded cots. She lets out a sound that's half laugh, half groan, burying her face against his neck. For a moment, they allow themselves the luxury of relief, ignoring the pain in their muscles and the bruises that will no doubt be worse by morning. He kisses the top of her head, feeling strangely protective, though he knows she could end him in a heartbeat if she chose. Eventually, the adrenaline rush fades, replaced by bone-deep fatigue. She pulls a blanket from one of the cots, and they manage to maneuver it beneath them. He drapes another over her shoulders, wrapping them both. The stone floor is cold, but they have each other's body heat. She curls into him, breath slowing, her furred arms draped across his chest. With the last remnants of his consciousness, he marvels at how surreal this is, an alien warrior once marked as his bounty, now the closest thing he has to solace in a galaxy gone mad. He dreams of a snowstorm that night, swirling flakes turning to ash as the Empire's ships burn overhead. But he also dreams of her, her fierce eyes locked on his, the warmth of her body against the unrelenting cold. By morning, when light seeps through the cracks in the rocky ceiling, he wakes to find her still in his arms, ears flicking in half-sleep. A pang of something he might call contentment courses through him, a feeling so foreign he almost doesn't recognize it. She stirs, blinking. Their gazes meet, and a silent understanding passes between them. Whatever this is, it's become more than necessity. But the moment is fleeting, shattered when a sharp rap sounds at the door. They scramble upright, hastily adjusting clothes. She rakes her fingers through her hair, trying to compose herself. He stands, wincing at the sting of bruised muscles. There's no time for lingering glances or whispered confessions. Larina's voice cuts through the door. "Saska, we're moving out." Saska exhales, a mix of frustration and acceptance. "We'll be right there," she calls, voice steady. She glances back at Cade, and for a split second, her eyes soften, revealing gratitude and something akin to affection. Then she reverts to the warrior they all expect, tugging on her gear. He does the same, securing his rifle strap. Together, they exit the chamber, stepping into the flurry of preparations. No one comments on their disheveled state, or the new intensity in their combined presence. But he notices a few furtive glances, curious or knowing. They push forward with the next phase of the plan, rallying more clans, forging alliances, targeting the Empire's data vault. Even as they do, the tension between them simmers just below the surface, no longer purely antagonistic. It's a binding force, a magnetism that drives them onward. Each subtle brush of their arms or exchange of glances brings a rush of memory from the night before. Yet they maintain their focus on the mission. It's bigger than them now. Days bleed into a blur of strategy sessions, clandestine meetings, and harsh treks across unforgiving terrain. Their small force grows, drawing in a handful of stragglers from across the mountains. Each night, Saska and Cade find themselves drawn together in whatever private space they can carve out, exchanging heated kisses and stolen touches, sometimes collapsing in exhaustion before they can even speak. Neither calls it love, but it's a bond they can't deny, a shared defiance of the Empire that wants to control her body and a past that's robbed him of hope. On the eve of the raid on the data vault, they gather in a sheltered canyon. Scouts confirm that the vault is lightly guarded, thanks to the Empire's focus on hunting them in broader territory. Larina addresses the assembled Husker, describing the infiltration plan, while Cade chimes in with tactical insights from his soldier days. Saska stands at the center, silent but resolute. When it's over, each clan leader returns to their unit to prepare for the dawn assault. Saska and Cade remain behind, each lost in thought. He lays a hand on her shoulder. She turns, searching his face. "We're about to make a statement," she says quietly. "I can't guarantee we'll survive." He snorts softly. "We never could." She inclines her head. "True. But this time, it feels final." He steps closer, gently brushing her cheek. "If it is, I'll die fighting beside you." She closes her eyes at his touch. "I never asked you to follow me this far. You didn't have to." She kisses him then, a brief but searing connection that leaves them both breathless. It holds a wealth of unspoken emotion, gratitude, fear, something that edges dangerously close to love. When they part, the resolve in her eyes is tempered by a fleeting softness. He holds onto that look, even as they separate to join the others, rifles in hand, hearts pounding with the knowledge that everything rides on the coming battle. Dawn breaks gray and cold. A light snow drifts down, masking their approach. The data vault is embedded in a cliffside, a fortress of metal and reinforced stone. According to Intel, it houses the Empire's genealogical records for the region, possibly including Saska's entire lineage. If they destroy or corrupt it, future hunts will be crippled. They might even free thousands of Husker from the threat of forced breeding. Saska leads one strike team, Cade at her side. Larina leads another. They synchronize their approach, using the early morning gloom as cover. The perimeter guards are few, and the watchers at the gate seem bored. Cade can't help but suspect a trap, but they push on, each second precious. They spring the assault, neutralizing the outer defenses with quick, brutal efficiency. Saska tears through a pair of guards, her pistol muzzle pressed to their throats before they can raise alarms. Cade fires precise shots, clearing the path for the advancing Husker. Alarms eventually blare, but by then, the main doors are breached. They flood inside, a wave of determined fighters. Corridors echo with shouts and the hiss of energy weapons. Cade sticks close to Saska, picking off Empire troopers who scramble to mount a defense. The Husker are relentless, fueled by fury and the promise of liberation. Strobe lights flicker, casting the carnage in stark shadows. In the confusion, Cade and Saska slip past the main firefight, heading deeper into the vault's data core. A massive chamber greets them, rows of blinking servers and towering columns of data storage. The hum of machinery vibrates through the floor. A handful of Empire technicians scramble for cover, but Saska's team subdues them quickly. She and Cade press on to the central console, ignoring the chaos around them. They need to plant charges or hack the system. Either way, the records must be destroyed. Saska gestures to one of the Husker tech specialists. Shut it down or corrupt it. Whatever you can do. The specialist, a wiry male with a scarred muzzle, nods and begins typing furiously. Cade keeps watch, scanning for reinforcements. Saska paces behind them, tension lining her face. A distant rumble suggests the Empire is sending heavier troops. Their time is short. The specialist curses under his breath, struggling with the advanced encryption. It's not easy. They've layered the data. Saska's eyes flick to Cade. Stalling isn't an option. If we can't shut it down soon, we blow it. He nods, producing a set of thermite charges from his pack. Then we do it the old-fashioned way. Suddenly, the door bursts open, and a squad of Empire soldiers storms in, energy rifles blazing. One of the Husker fighters goes down in a hail of plasma. Saska dives behind a console, returning fire. Cade pops up, taking out two, but the squad leader is heavily armored, pressing forward with mechanical precision. He curses, needing more cover. The specialist ducks, abandoning the console to avoid being shot. Saska snarls, slamming a fresh charge into her pistol. In the chaos, Cade sees an opportunity. He arms a thermite charge and tosses it toward a cluster of servers on the far side of the chamber. It sticks, red lights blinking ominously. We've got 2 minutes, he shouts, hoping Saska hears. The squad leader opens fire in his direction, and he dives for the floor. Sparks fly, cables severed by the scorching blasts. Saska seizes the moment to lunge forward, planting a vicious kick in the squad leader's midsection. The armor absorbs much of it, but the impact staggers him. She fires 2 shots at close range, one glancing off his chest plate, and another damaging the helmet. Cade scrambles to his feet, finishing the squad leader with a precisely aimed shot that finds a joint in the armor. The soldier collapses in a heap. Move! Saska yells, voice echoing. The rest of the Husker team is already retreating, dragging their wounded. The tech specialist hurries after them, cursing the lost chance to hack the system. Cade and Saska make sure everyone's out, then sprint down the corridor. Their footsteps pound on the metal floor as the thermite timer ticks away. Alarms shriek from every corridor. Reinforcements pour in from side passages, but the Husker fighters hold them off, exchanging deadly fire. They reach the outer halls just as an explosion rocks the facility. A roar of flame erupts behind them, and the building quakes, lights flickering. Another explosion follows, presumably from secondary charges. Doors buckle, vents blast scorching air. Flames tear through the data core, incinerating servers and records alike. It's chaos incarnate, and all they can do is run. Outside, the battle still rages, but the Husker have forced the Empire troops back. Some Empire shuttles attempt liftoff from a makeshift pad, only to be shot down by well-coordinated Husker snipers. Smoke billows into the sky, mingling with the snowy gusts. As Cade and Saska emerge, battered and coughing, they see the tide turning. A ragged cheer goes up from the Husker lines as the vault belches fire and debris. The genealogical data, records that enslaved generations, burns in the inferno. Larina finds them in the chaos, face smeared with soot, but eyes bright. "We did it," she gasps, voice raw. "They're retreating." Saska nods, fighting for breath. She clutches Cade's arm, her grip trembling with adrenaline. He's not sure if it's from relief or exhaustion. He looks around, seeing the bodies strewn in the snow, both Empire and Husker. The cost is high, but the blow they dealt could be devastating to their enemies. Saska glances at the inferno, tears glistening in her eyes. He knows she's mourning the loss of her people, even as she celebrates the destruction of the Empire's control. As the Empire's forces scatter, the Husker raise a triumphant howl, echoing off the surrounding cliffs. It's a sound of defiance and release, centuries of subjugation roiled into one piercing cry. Cade stands among them, an outsider no longer, feeling the rush of victory in his veins. He glances at Saska, who is gazing up at the fiery sky, tears on her cheeks freezing in the cold air. Slowly, she turns to him. Their eyes meet, and in that moment, words are unnecessary. He steps forward, cupping her face, wiping away a tear. She leans into his touch, her breath hitching. The clamor of battle subsides around them as the Husker realize the Empire is falling back. This is a moment of triumph, and a moment of finality. "They'll come again," Saska says, voice trembling with both sorrow and resolve. "But we've done something they can't ignore." He nods, thumbs brushing across the fur at her temples. "You've shown them they aren't invincible." She exhales shakily, and for the first time, the possibility of a future glimmers in her gaze, a life not ruled by fear. Cade pulls her into a rough embrace, ignoring the stares of the other Husker. She clings to him, inhaling his scent as if anchoring herself to this victory, to this man who's become both ally and something more. When they break apart, he sees raw determination in her features. "It's time we started talking about tomorrow," she whispers. He nods. "I'm with you." Her lips press into a thin line, fighting a surge of emotion. "Kay, if we survive this, if my people somehow reclaim their freedom, you realize what comes next, right?" A half-smile tugs at his mouth. "You want my husky babies human? Is that it?" The question escapes him with a playful lilt, echoing the tension that's simmered between them since that first standoff in the snow. She blinks, taken aback by his audacity, then a sudden laugh bubbles out of her, raw and genuine amidst the wreckage. "You're incorrigible." He shrugs, grin widening despite the bruises and burns. "You started it." She leans in, pressing her forehead to his. "Maybe I did." Her gaze grows serious. "I want us to have a chance at living. Really living." He threads his fingers through her hair. "Then let's do it. I don't care where we end up, as long as we do it together." A quiet hush falls around them, the world narrowing to this promise. Fire crackles behind them, and the remaining Husker gather to regroup, but for a moment, it's just the two of them. They've broken free from the chains of their past, forging a bond that transcends race, war, and the primal instincts that first brought them together. The final toll is high, but they stand amid the smoke and carnage triumphant, hearts beating in unison. She whispers one last time, voice barely audible over the dying screams of flame. "Yes, together." And in that certainty, their story finds its natural conclusion, a blazing promise that, after the battles are done, after the Empire learns the price of underestimating them, they will face whatever comes next side by side. Free. Desperate. And undeniably bound by the raw, undeniable force that first sparked between them in the frozen snow.